Welcome, everyone, to the Leadership in Quarters podcast, the interview series where leaders come to share their perspectives on different leadership topics. I'm Josh Seldin, and today's guest is Melissa Sierra. Melissa Sierra is an executive coach, strategic growth advisor, keynote speaker, and seasoned media executive who helps leaders thrive and create opportunities in an AI-driven world. With over 20 years of experience leading enterprise growth, commercial strategy, and organizational transformation, Melissa founded her own coaching practice to help executives and founders bridge the gap between technical expertise and executive influence. She is the creator of the Opportunity Flywheel, a framework designed to drive sustainable growth and focuses heavily on dismantling the new self-imposed glass ceilings, the invisible habits and assumptions that restrict capable leaders from reaching their full potential. A firm believer that leadership is forged through the real-world experience rather than classrooms, Melissa grounds her insights in what she calls the leadership laboratory, the daily decisions, career pivots, and moments of uncertainty where true leadership is built. She brings this practical philosophy to life as a speaker at top AI and tech conferences, a member of the Forbes Communication Council, and the host of her own podcast, Holding the Room: Leadership, AI, and the Human Edge. Ultimately, Melissa's mission is to empower leaders to break through their own barriers and unlock more opportunity than they ever thought possible. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, and hello to all your listeners out there. And I really appreciate having this conversation today.
Oh, me too. I'm so excited to have you here. And I love the topic we're going to cover. Just for all the listeners, we're going to cover using fear as a catalyst, which I think is very important for today. I think there's a lot of fear in the workplace, probably in and outside the workplace, but especially in the workplace as we do our daily tasks. So I think our conversation will really strike a common nerve across everybody.
That's right.
Yeah. So if we can, let's jump right in with fear. I believe, my opinion, fear with how it is today, a lot of times is something that maybe we call a red light, something that stops us in our tracks. How do we stop seeing fear as a red light activity and more as something that fuels us to keep going?
That's a great question. And I think my career story is something that many can relate to. I was always driven and passionate, but I felt like I could never fit in the corporate world. I thought I really had to mimic everyone else. I spent time guessing how to get into the rooms that mattered. And I was always feeling on the fringe of the real important projects. I had to discover that what was true for me was that I needed to understand the patterns around me. So, what you call the leadership laboratory. I had to believe that through grit, curiosity, clarity, conviction, my character spoke for itself, and I needed to rise to who my identity was specifically. I couldn't mimic anyone because the conditions that got me there weren't the same as everyone else's. How my beliefs were shaped also were different. And this is how I became one of the few and only Hispanic women in the C-suite at the media agency. And I
Wow.
really pushed myself in every way to open myself up to judgment, writing for Forbes Communication, speaking at media and marketing conferences, posting on LinkedIn. And a funny thing happened. I wasn't judged. I was actually invited into more rooms and more opportunities inside and outside my organization that really led to this catalyst today. And for me, that's how I help lead my clients. Fear usually isn't telling you to stop. It's telling you that something important is happening. And instead of questioning, what am I afraid of? The question is, what is fear trying to teach me in this moment? Often, fear is pointing towards growth, not danger. And some of the biggest opportunities in my career have started with that discomfort and being self aware to exist in that moment, but still push through.
I think that's so important because a lot of times today, what you hear is that people need to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's really that discomfort that you just spoke of that drives us into growth. And again, like you said, this feeling that we have when you have to put a name to the feeling, we call it fear.
Yeah.
But as soon as you say fear, we now give into the stereotype of fear and we allow it to stop us instead of allowing it to make us uncomfortable, accept the fact that we're uncomfortable, and then have that move us forward and grow.
Yeah, I think one of the journeys that I've been on, especially being an entrepreneur now and running this coaching business, is I've stumbled so many more times than I have in the past 20 years of my career. And I think I've gotten really excited about being perfectly imperfect because within the past year, I've gotten more promotions, if you will, through this entrepreneurship than I have on my own throughout my entire career journey because you're throwing yourself in, you're learning how to be a new novice in so many different areas. And I think for many corporations, are just a very stoic entity within themselves. It's very limiting in terms of inspiring curiosity and innovation. That's what the entity seeks, but in
Yeah.
an individual world, it's very difficult to scale that from process to tech to platforms. So being able to go on this new journey has spun this insurgence within me to help others see what I couldn't see for myself or taking me 20 years to get here to learn and just giving them the permission to lead in this modern, disruptive way.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift, I think, for a lot of people because if they look at your journey is, as you said, one that had some stumbles, had some missteps, and I think that's what drives a lot of fear. People have that fear of failure and they don't want to, you said it earlier, be seen as either a failure, it's embarrassing because you couldn't do something, but you use the word learning. This is a journey of learning, and that's really what this is. So fear stops you from the potential of failing, but it's also stopping you from these learning activities because that's really what these failures are. And failure is such a strongly negative word, I feel like, but it's these missteps that allow us to learn and grow. And you've obviously done it over 20 years, and now all of your clients are lucky enough to not have to spend their 20 years to learn everything that you're sharing with them.
It's true. And I've had to start taking stock instead of thinking about accomplishments because coming from corporate world, we're so driven by KPIs. We're not thinking of the soft KRIs.
Mm.
And so I started to journey and journal my advancements. So what are the steps that I'm actually taking to get to the level of success and redefining what success now looks like? For me, it was sitting in the boardroom, going through the 50th iteration of the Craig's deck and saying, is this the room that I fought to be in? This can't be it. All this ladder climbing and all the things that I thought were going to be successful. And so the advancements really make me proud being able to talk to you today, being able to write for Forbes, just the steps that are taking to build my character further, but also do meaningful work that leaves a legacy and an impact. And it's one of the stories that really leads me into one of the clients that I was working with. She came as a high performing sales representative at a media tech company, and they were going through some shakeups. And when we started to work together, what really surfaced for her was that she wanted to work for a nonprofit. But she started questioning, could I really make this career transition? And that's when we started to move through the 3C framework of my practice, which is curiosity, clarity, and conviction. So, first, curiosity, what had to be true of why she wanted to work for a nonprofit specifically? Why switch to a full-time role versus just doing this voluntarily, which she can easily do? And what would it make an impact and a contribution for her in this space? And as those answers surfaced, we moved into the clarity portion. What would this mean for motivation versus how she was spending her time today? If nothing changed and she didn't go explore this, how would she feel about her job and her role? When she feels she doesn't have enough transferable work to cross over to it, what is true of nonprofit and sales? Nonprofit is great at doing the amazing work with limited resources and limited funding, but they really need somebody that can galvanize that forefront of creating the right relationships, being able to negotiate, really having a perspective on growing the right relationships. And she realized she could close that gap, that they don't have that resource in-house to solve for them. And so that's when we moved into the last C, which was conviction. The greatest ideas mean nothing without declaring this is the moment of action and where your drive for your mission of your life, not your role of your job, is greater than any fear of the unknown. So making the right decision instead of waiting for perfect certainty is really where the groundwork happens. And I think what people need to realize is that leaders don't get paid for predicting the future accurately. They get paid for making thoughtful decisions with incomplete information and doing the best that they do today.
Yeah, and I think you've said a lot that resonates with me. Some of it is that it seems like your 3C framework really connects to people's value drivers. And a lot of times people don't sit and think about what their value drivers are. And so you mentioned it earlier where really these people are in these professional settings, setting goals, setting their vision of their own future based on other people's value drivers that they're now taking on themselves. But it doesn't mean that much to them. And it seems like this 3C framework really evokes what my true value drivers are out of me to make sure the direction I'm heading is in line with what I value.
Yes, and I think the most inspiring thing for me is seeing that transformation. Usually, when people start with me on their journey, they're like hunched over, very sullen, and it's just a call that they come to. I can't tell you whether it's the third or the fifth, everybody's on a different journey, but they come to the call and they're lit up. They can't wait to tell me what's exciting, what's new that they've untapped, undiscovered, and they want to lead the conversation. It's not me even probing anymore. And I think that spark, that encapsulation of enlightenment is really what's exciting the most to it. Because I think a lot of times people, like you said, feel like they can't have personal values in the professional world specifically. And so my question back to people is, are you playing in the game or are you playing someone else's game? Because I think two opposing things can be true. I think that you can be very driven by your own intentional purpose and lead your team in a specific way, but not compromise the organization's perspective of values. And that's something that served me really well because in times of transition, whether it's reorg or right now with AI adoption, et cetera, being able to meet people where they're at, that you're on that same journey and having that level of comfortability and permission to speak up and have their voice is what then motivates people and galvanizes people around that singular vision versus the larger entity, which sometimes they don't even get that perspective and purview into the large stakeholders and what they're thinking. So being able to translate that mission down to the environment that you're existing in today, and more specifically, wanting to coexist with those around you in this interdependency that nurtures relationships is the key.
And a lot of leaders don't realize that as they set these visions and these goals, they just think, hey, I'm going to go do this big presentation. I'm going to set this vision. I'm going to roll it out to everybody. And now everybody's magically motivated and are just going to go do it. And they don't spend this time really figuring out how to waterfall the meaningfulness down to people and have it meet them, as you said, in their own environment to really drive this motivation and go beyond the fear that they're feeling.
Yeah, there's a huge disconnect. This is something that I spoke about in the Women in Tech conference in May, and that's my BET framework. So, boldness, empathy, and trust. I tell leaders today, don't pretend that fear isn't there, particularly around AI or any sort of role transformation. Name it. People already feel it. So, if you
Yeah.
think you're putting one over on somebody or that you're wearing the mask of anonymity, you're not. And then shift that conversation from uncertainty to agency. And that's really empowering. Ask, what do we know? What can we influence today? What decisions can we make today as a team? And then momentum comes from that movement,
Hmm.
not perfect confidence. It's one of the reasons why I built the Operators Intelligence Council, which is privately curated for leaders at the top to be able to name things in private where they're paralyzed by judgment and to move from frozen to having transparency on their terms while respecting the organizational norms that they're existing in. And this space has really benefited my top executives because they're able to pressure test their ideas, isolate their fears, and know how to proactively address their C-suite colleagues before they enter into the boardroom specifically. And I think it's important to really assess that. So when I say, are you in the game or are you playing someone else's game? If you're not thinking that you need to land communication on the other side of the table in a way that really speaks to the impact and then the implication, you're really having some disconnect already yourself with having even the right conversation with people. That's going to fly right over their heads. And I
Right.
think one of the motivational speakers that I listen to the most, Ryan Leake, always professes, what is it like to be on the other side of me? And I don't think we ask that enough. We're so driven by wanting to be heard because oftentimes in this congested world that we're in, communication is flying by us so rapidly, but we don't get paid by the email. We don't get paid by the PowerPoint presentation. The real payment is the return on value from the investments of the conversations that we're having and the relationships that we're building.
I love that mindset shift of what is it like to be on the other side of the table from myself. It's something that, as you said, a lot of people don't ever think about. I don't think about often, but it does make you wonder about everything you've mentioned so far and how we come across and whether we're communicating effectively and whether we really are getting that return on investment. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It's so important because I think if you don't start to build that character, which is what I was saying in the beginning, then you start worrying about every little thing that you're saying. If you have to
Mhm.
come down a little bit harder on your team, if you have to deliver bad news, if you have to deliver bad news to your senior suite management team, but if they know your character, they put less stock in the situation and more in terms of this person exercises good judgment, has already come to the table understanding the impact of all these things, and also understands me on the other side of the table. And that really resonates because now people are speaking about your name in good ways when you're
Right.
not even in the room. And that gets to the point that you opened up with, which is I think a lot of people are putting these self-imposed glass ceilings unknowingly. I had a client come to me where she was so proud of being indispensable at the organization. And I said, tell me more about that. And she said, I've just really built myself in the trenches. Everybody needs me. Everybody's coming to me. And particularly for women, I think we wear that as a badge of honor,
Mhm.
but silently we resent it then
Right.
because everybody then is exhaustingly coming to us. But nobody's thinking about us for opportunities because we put ourselves so much in the trenches that senior leaders now can't see us as leaders ourselves because we've done such a good job always taking care of things that are blowing up.
Mhm.
And we've also not allowed our own folks around us, those that work to contribute up to us, in a bad spot because they can't figure out new ways of learning themselves and solving potential problems and coming with solutions proactively to us. So we build up this tension point of resentment that we can't really name, but we feel from burnout, from just the anger of seeing an email pop up or a certain name pop up or a project. And then also we get frazzled because no one's thinking about us in that next opportunity. So really building advocacy and influence through that character shaping is important. And I think while people think AI skills are important right now, I would say yes in terms of how you're using prompting. I
Mhm.
would say no in terms of I think soft skills are more important now than ever. And it's not something that you can just read in one textbook. It's really amassing yourselves in podcasts like yours, really being able to learn on some leadership books that are out there that are unconventional, but also living in that leadership laboratory lab of patterns. How do people move and shake within your organization? Who actually makes decisions versus who influences them? How do promotions typically work? Don't think of them as sprints in terms of performance reviews, because there's a lot of red tape behind the
Mhm.
scenes that you don't even know about, and that maybe your manager isn't even privy to be able to share with you. You've got to get really good at being in the game and really understanding where your influence and impact matters and building up your own personal voice.
And I had a guest a couple weeks ago that actually mentioned this as well. And I'm a firm believer, as we spoke about AI, where everybody is afraid, back to fear, that AI is going to go take their jobs. You're going to have all these mass layoffs because AI is coming, big bad AI is coming, and they're going to take our
Yep.
jobs. But really, from what I've seen so far, even in my own organization, is AI is an effective tool. It is an
Mhm.
effective technical tool that will make my job easier. And what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to do less of my technical work, and then it's going to have me have to focus more on the soft skills and the connection that you talked about. And that's when you really start realizing about everything we've talked about so far, where fear is stopping people in their tracks. Fear is creating self-limiting beliefs that then stop people from being able to be more than they are and they can be. And that is where leadership is going. I'm a full believer that's where they're going. AI is going to be here to stay. AI is going to make all of the technical stuff something we never have to think about anymore. It's just going to happen. And we are going to need to figure out how to lead and get the most out of our people.
Absolutely. And I think it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy and frustrated with a lot of publications out there because they're the ones that kind of memorialize this concept and idea that AI is going to replace people. It's in every clickbait article that you see
Yeah.
out there. But you really need to get down to the brass tacks of one, the organization needs a better evaluation criteria of how they actually think that AI is going to transcend everything and really change the organization because I've seen a lot of organizations just force people to go out there and test. but you've never asked them to test anything before. You've actually taken agency away from them in many respects. They don't know now what's actually a good idea or ways to surface out testing and feedback and things like that. So, one, the organization needs to create that. But I
Mm.
also think the manager and the employee relationship is transformational when it's done right in terms of how that employee feels about their contributions at the organization. And so, what is that shared evaluation criteria for how we're going to use this across the dynamic? I see in many cases departments sharing information back and forth one on one, which is great. But how do we scale that across departments? And why aren't we looking at the cross contributions of AI in that framework of that shared codependency for being able to do our jobs better that unlocks the bigger truth to the organization, how it serves its customers? And then the biggest thing that I see organizations missing is not thinking about how roles and responsibilities need to change too. Because now, if you're asking people to become more strategic when they've been more behind the scenes, do you even know that's what motivates them? Do they
Right.
even want to now be front facing around that? They've always thought of their jobs as tactical. You now need to help them rewrite their job descriptions and also with that, what the pay trajectory is going to be to keep up with that pacing in the technological advancement world, and then also what talent mapping looks like. And that's the part that I'm most curious about for HR leaders, but also C-suite coming together to close that gap. Because as I work with a lot of organizational elements on that coaching side, that's the biggest gap that I see right now.
Yeah, and I think even in addition to that, it's are they interested? Does it motivate them? And can they do it? And I think those are all the questions we never ask. And I've had a couple different guests that come here, and I think they bring up great points about how we put very good executors in leadership roles.
Yeah.
And that is the situation we're in now, where you've got all these very good executors that AI will help and will scale it where we need. And they're going to now be less executors. And as you said, more strategic. They're going to be leadership. They're going to be doing all these things. So, of course, the first questions you want to ask are, do they even want to do it? Are they going to be motivated? Because even if they have the capability, but they don't want to do it and they're not motivated by it, they're not going to do a great job because why would I do that? But then when you're like, okay, this seems like something that they can do, and I've been able to count on them for the last 10 years, and then we just plop them into the position that we're putting them in and never ask the question, have I given them enough tools to be able to do that? Do they know how to lead people and be a manager of others? We just assume they do. And then they were motivated at one point, and now when they continue having all these missteps because we haven't built capability, then they start resenting it.
That's the biggest thing. What have I assumed? So everybody going back to the top of our conversation is walking around being really confident, but yet silently unconfident. And so that assumption gives them confidence because if everybody's walking around assuming the same thing, then it must be true. And I think for the people that get forced into those roles, like you said, it feels like entrapment. And
Mm.
that's where the psychological safety starts to erode culture because now they think they're being tested unfairly, not given the right resources, and the organization has challenges already without AI inherently
Yeah.
scaling because the processes that got them today aren't necessarily the ones that are going to get them to unlock what forward thinking tomorrow is. And they haven't solved for that. But now you're also compounding where their insecurities lie, where their fear of judgment is compounding. And then you're asking them to go lead a team, and then you're asking them to roll up insights to you when you really weren't clear on the mission. So alignment doesn't seem like agreeing. Alignment comes with one shared objective, one mission that transcends all hairy gray areas that are the unknowns, with everyone co-signing on the outgoing mission and also understanding that there might be imperfect failures that come along the way, but saying, I've got you. I think that you can do this. We've agreed to do this together. And then here's how we're going to keep each other informed.
And that seems to be something that we can do from the leadership perspective. On the other side of it, if you have somebody in this position who is paralyzed by or just frozen from fear, what are some things that they can do to move past that, whether it is your 3C framework or something else? What other opportunities do they have to move past it or maybe force those conversations you just talked about with their own leadership?
Yeah, it's one that I asked myself that made the change for everything. What story have I accepted about myself that is no longer true? Or if fear wasn't making this decision, what would I do that's next? So my tagline to my website is on the other side of fear is magic, because the biggest breakthrough usually isn't learning something new. It's letting go of the identity that you've already outgrown. You just have this fear encapsulating it. So I think for me, it's really something that I've dug into the current episode of Holding the Room, and it's called The Opportunity Cost That Almost No One Calculates. And it's redefining what success looks like and not settling in comfort zones. And that led to the opportunity flywheel framework that you referenced earlier. And I built it because growth isn't linear anymore.
Right.
It moves in cycles. Strategy creates that clarity. Visibility attracts opportunity. Relationships create trust, and execution builds credibility. The results then compound that momentum, and then you refine and you repeat. So most leaders only focus on one of those, but the stronger leaders intentionally build all of them. And I think that's how you start getting at your own way. You don't have to solve a whole 180 of where you're going to with fear, but take one small step. And that's where that journal of advancements is really critical for you, because most people just fail to execute. It's something that Gary Vee is a big proponent of, Alex Hormozy, the goats, if you will, that are really successful believe. But I feel like if you were to really take a whole log of your journey to get here, you would find out that a lot of the things that you feared the most started with taking a small action. And that was the one decision of, everything that got me here was being able to just depend on myself. Nobody actually handed me any of the promotions that I've seen in my career. It was just because I said, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to go get, and these are the steps that I'm going to lay the groundwork to get there. And no president is going to get you there. No organization as magnificent as Google and all these others, Claude now, that are going to get us there to that next level of having that accessibility to equalize everybody at that same plate. They're not the ones that are going to make you great and the ones that are going to make you memorable. It's you yourself at your identity at the core and putting yourself out there.
A lot of people don't realize when they think about all this, you keep using the word journey, that it is a journey. And people think that I can just take one big step and then I'm where I need to be. And when that doesn't happen, they allow that fear to come back in and stop them again because they think, I tried, but
Yeah.
I tried to eat the elephant in one bite. I didn't try to eat it one bite at a time. And they just completely stop themselves without realizing that it is a journey. And in a journey, you will make wrong turns and you will go somewhere else. Like I'm going to go on my journey differently than Melissa went on her journey. We may get to the same endpoint, but we may take two different ways. And I may take a couple more wrong turns than you do, but it doesn't mean my journey was a failure. It just means it's my journey.
Yep, it's an important point. And I think self-awareness is the greatest gift that you can take and give to yourself. And I think if you were sitting in more present moments, you'd actually realize that even though I'm talking about accomplishments today, every day I wake up in fear. Building the business is fear. Joining
Yeah.
this podcast is fear. So many different things, just making sure that the technology is set up. Everything is a fearful moment if you let
Right.
it be. And I think that your brain is always trying to do its best to keep you safe and keep you in the zone that you know, but you'll never really get to know who you could be, and also learning how far you can stretch yourself and what you're actually giving back to people if you don't put that in that right step. So a lot of the different ways that I've heard great feedback is just being able to not have to sit in that comfort zone. Or I had a girl working for me and she just really thought that this wasn't right for her. And I said, somebody told me a long time ago that when I made a mistake, a really big mistake, it could either be the defining moment that's going to make me rise as a phoenix and never do this again, or it's going to catapult me in a completely different direction to a career that I was really meant for. And she took that step and she said, I actually want to go do this other thing. And she
Wow.
said, you telling me that and having this moment as a boss and not holding this mistake against me actually led me to go pursue this passion. I'm scared as hell, but I want to go do this because I'm actually excited for the first time not having to do media spreadsheets. And honestly, that was the greatest feedback that she could give me, because it's scary having those conversations.
Yeah.
And you're hoping that honest truth, actually people are open to it and think that you're giving them a gift. And the fact that she was present in that moment to have the self-awareness, being a junior person, but then also allowing me that permission to talk to her as somebody who's been through it and sharing my own big mistakes, really transcends everything. And so I think leaders like yourself and the guests you've had on are really shaping what that modern disruptive leader looks like. It's no longer that stoic C-suite management that you thought it was. We don't want to frighten young people from actually taking career journeys, and the corporate world is an unsettling expectation for them. We want them to get excited of what that path and that journey looks like, even if every day they wake up and they have 50 ideas of failure or fearness in them, but they are excited by that and say, okay, even if I feared, I took that step forward.
And I think the most important thing, and it's been a theme of what I've heard as we've talked, is really staying true to yourself, redefining what success looks like to you, your value drivers. And your first story and your first example was really talking about how you allowed fear to have you mimic others instead of being true to who you are. And I think that's something a lot of people can take away from this conversation is once you know what you value, once you know who you are, and everybody knows who your true character is, really knows who you are, that's when you can really use fear as this catalyst to move you forward.
Yeah, you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
I know that there's a million things on this entrepreneur journey that I don't know, as a new podcaster that I don't know, but I love it because I'm going to go see it through, and being able to go on a promotion, if you will, for myself of being able to constantly rise, being an accountant, being a customer service agent, all these things firsthand is actually being able to promote that corporate could never do for me, that I always felt entrapped in, but allows me now to see things in a new light and a new value and give back in my current role at the corporation in so many ways that I wouldn't have been able to see for myself. And so I think what it comes down to is that the future belongs to those leaders who are curious longer than everyone else. And AI, to your point, will automate everything, but it can't replace judgment, trust, courage, or the ability to create opportunity for other people, not just for yourself. And that's the leadership that I'm interested in building.
That's awesome. And Melissa, I have loved everything we've talked about so far. Before we wrap up, do you have anything that you want to share with anybody? Any final parting words?
Yeah, I'd invite you to take my free leadership opportunity assessment if you're interested, if you liked what you heard today, to create your next open ceiling and your biggest opportunity. So if you're inclined, you can reach out to me, msierra@focalpointcoaching.com.
Great. Thank you. And for everybody, I will have all of Melissa's information there to remind everybody this was Melissa Sierra. I will have her email, I will have information for that assessment and anything else that she'd like to share with us because I'm sure with everything that you've heard today, you're probably dying to learn more very soon. So please reach out in the off chance that you can't get a hold of Melissa, get a hold of me, and I'll make sure we get you both together. But I'm sure there's a ton more to learn. This is just a little appetizer in the full meal that is all of the things that Melissa coaches everybody on. So for sure, do that. You can like, follow, and subscribe to my podcast found on all the podcast platforms, to my Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Leading Quarters. And you can email me with any questions that you may have or ideas you may have for future episodes at leadinquarters@gmail.com. But again, Melissa, getting back to the start of our conversation, and throughout the conversation, fear lives in all of us in different forms and different amounts. And this is one of those topics that I think will really touch people because it's something we all live with and experience. There have been people that have come on and we've had very niche topics, but this is not a specific niche topic that will only touch a few people. This is something that every single person who listens to will be able to internalize and reflect upon. And so I really appreciate you coming and sharing all that today.
Yeah, I think it was wonderful that you put this out there for your listeners, and for all you listeners, go and binge Josh's other episodes because he does a really great way of creating frameworks of just on the job practice, not theory, like some other podcasters that are out there. And I think you would benefit from growing and really being exposed to the content.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure for being here.